A couple of questions. Who are you? What are you? And what do you identify as?
The topic of gender identity has been in the news a lot lately, and your kids are certainly learning more about it at school. So here to talk more about it is Dr. Laura Saunders. Thanks for being with us, Doc.
Happy Wednesday.
Happy Wednesday. We were just talking about this because here in our company, we're getting trained on the use of pronouns. And I think it's a little bit confusing, even for people who are want to do this right and want to learn. But explain to us a little bit the difference of what we're having to understand nowadays between, say, the sex you're born with and your gender or gender identity.
So thank you so much. And this is such an important topic. It has really been in the news. And while, we're not going to step into some of the controversial topics, although I do sometimes like a good controversy, but not for today. Okay. So, but let's talk about sex. So when we use the word sex, we mean biological sex or what you're assigned based on body parts. But we use the more general term. It's really a social construct, and that's gender, right? So gender is classifying someone as male or female, or something in between, because we're really moving away from talking about gender as a binary and looking at it as non-binary. It really is a spectrum. That your gender identity is that internal feeling of masculinity or femininity. It's a combination of genetic and environmental influences. And your gender expression is how you kind of present, more masculine or feminine. In this country, we're very gendered, right? Colors have gender, clothing has gender, and also the term transgender or gender nonconforming. And that's a person whose internal gender identity does not match their biological sex and varies from kind of culturally expected characteristics or circumstances.
See, now it's interesting. Transgender, I forgive me, I'm getting it wrong. I thought that was also equatable with transsexual, but that's different when you have an operation to go from male to female or female to male, whereas transgender
so
is
that's
just
that's a great question. So transsexual is an older term that we really don't use anymore, because we're not transgender, like the word trans means across, like you're taking a transatlantic flight. So you're moving across gender where your internal masculinity or femininity is not matching your biological sex. So someone can identify as transgender or gender nonconforming even without any medical intervention. So it's not for me or anyone else to decide how someone else identifies. So it is a term that is a self-identified term based on that internal feeling of masculinity or femininity and whether or not it matches biological sex.
So you're saying also, in the information that we were researching, what you're saying is that most people, which may be new for people to understand, actually know and have this feeling about their gender at a very young age. They may not come out and tell you that they feel like a man or a woman or something in between till later, but they've been feeling this way for as long as they can remember at a very young age, maybe as early as kindergarten.
Yes. So what we know is that really by the time someone enters kindergarten, their gender identity, that internal feeling of masculinity or femininity, is fairly well set, except in those that where it's not set. And so what we see kind of non-conforming children. And if you ask any teacher that you talk to, these kids are in every classroom in every community in this state, certainly in all states. But what we do see a lot is adolescents also coming out as more kind of non-conforming or transgender, because it's when puberty starts. It's a time when obviously secondary sex characteristics become more highlighted. So that's also a time when we see a lot of individuals who might identify as gender non-conforming. The thing that I really worry about is that a lot of these young people have much greater risks for mental health difficulties. Because of stigma, because of fear of harassment and violence. So we really need to work on how we treat those individuals in our society that are different in some way.
Who do we go to if our child has questions? Do we go to our pediatrician? Do we seek mental health counseling? What do we do?
I think first and foremost, let's start with a dialogue at home, right? Allow this conversation to be talked about more openly. The worst thing you could do is shame your child and force them to be someone that they are not. So for the most part, if your child identifies as gender nonconforming or transgender in some way, or just really unsure and feel somewhat confused, to check with your pediatrician. There are mental health professionals that specialize in this, but start with a dialogue at home and really see if you can get some good information from your child or your adolescent first.
Thank you, Dr. Saunders. Always a pleasure. Thank you for the great advice. We appreciate it.
Happy to be here.
Thanks, doctor.